I'm just going to give Brother Kevin a chance to... He's right. Well, the slide that you can see on the screen, brethren and sisters and young people, is the slide that we concluded on last evening. We made the point there in the final dot point that the clearest message that Christ ever gave, that he would return in times of general prosperity. Now, you'd be amazed at the comments that I get when I take people to Luke chapter 17 and we talk about general prosperity. Inevitably, someone will come to me and say, oh, but what about the Africans and what about all the starving people in the world? But you've got to stand right back from it and have a look at the times in which we live in relation to those that have gone before. And generally speaking, worldwide, we have never had prosperity like we enjoy today. Even in Africa, on every second street corner, there's a McDonald's. So, you know, they enjoy a level of prosperity that they had never known in the past either. So there will always be the poor with us, Christ said. There'll never be a time, or at least not until his kingdom, when there won't be poor. But if you stand back and have a look at the last 50, 60 or 70 years of the world's history, you will know that it has been one of the times of greatest prosperity of all time, compared only to the days of Noah and the days of Lot. And you're all familiar, of course, with Luke chapter 17, verses 26 to 30. So we don't need to go into great detail about it, except to point out that Christ wanted it to be clear that he would come in times of general prosperity in the world. You know, he quotes the days of Noah and Lot, yet he makes absolutely no mention at all about the big problem in the days of Noah. What was that? Violence filled the earth. Does violence fill the earth today? Yes. He doesn't mention it. When he comes to the days of Lot, what was the big problem in the days of Lot? Well, sodomy. Is that a problem today? Yes. Will it bring divine judgment? Yes. He makes no mention of it. He's only interested in the one thing in both of those eras of time: the prosperity of those times. And he chooses them because there were no other times of prosperity when divine judgment fell. These are the only two eras in human history where divine judgment fell, where there was prosperity. So he chooses the days of Noah and the days of Lot for that purpose alone. So what were they doing? Well, we know what they were doing. We know that the Greek that is used here, for instance, at the beginning of verse 27, they did eat, they drank, is in the plural, imperfect, active, indicative, in the grammar. So it should read this way: they were eating and they were drinking. Because see, the imperfect tense means that an action has begun, but it doesn't get to finish. And they won't get to finish, so to speak. So just like it was in Sodom, brothers and sisters, when the morning crowd went down to the local coffee shop to get their latte, and they're sitting there in the comforts of Sodom, sipping their lattes. Kaboom! It all exploded. And they're all dead. That's how it's going to be. Prosperity to the last moment. And just before that judgment fell, the saints were taken out. Lot and his family were taken out. That's how it's going to be, brothers and sisters. Now, we're going to talk about the coming depression. Is that in prophecy? Yeah, it's here in Luke 17. As it was in the days of Noah and the days of Lot. Look at the pattern. prosperity up until the last day, then what happens? All their prosperity disappears virtually in a day. It took a week in Noah's day, a day in Lot's day. All gone in a day. Everything collapsed. That's exactly what's going to happen again. And this world's going to enter into a time of trouble such as never was. Now, these things that are listed here, eating and drinking, that's not about going to the dining room in the Bible school. All right? This is about restaurant-type eating. You can look up the Greek words that are used. Restaurant-type eating. And, of course, hotel and club-type drinking. Marrying and being given in marriage. Buying and selling. Planting. Building. They're only things that you can do if you've got money in your pocket. You don't have money in your pocket. You grew up in my father's generation. He was a child of the Depression. That's why he's 3 inches shorter than me. He grew up on condensed milk and bread and dripping. Try that for a while. So he's stunted in his growth. You grew up in those times. He used to have to wrap canvas around the tyres of his Austin A16 during the war years because you couldn't buy tyres. He knew that kind of privation. Now, that's not the time when Christ is going to come. He's going to come when our pockets are bulging with money and we can do virtually anything we want to. We can go to any restaurant, any place of entertainment. Nothing prevents us. You know, the number of Christadelphians are doing what I'm doing, jumping on planes and going overseas. It's just unbelievable. And you do that. I know what it costs me, and you do that. I've got pockets bulging with money, but don't come and see me. But you know what I mean? There's never been a time like this of general prosperity. And it will go on like that until the day that Christ comes. He sends his angels to take you and me to the judgment seat. And we'll be whipped out, and the same day, boom, it's going to go down the gurgler, big time. And we're going to see that in a little clip later on. All their prosperity collapsed in a day when the saints were taken away. Now that's the clear message of Luke 17. It's the clear message of Luke 21. It's the clear message of the last of the 7 letters that the Lord wrote to the ecclesias in Asia via John. Here is the one to Laodicea. Because thou sayest, I'm rich and increase with goods and have need of nothing. You don't know your true state, he says to them. But this is the only one of those 7 letters that has these words in it. Behold, I stand at the door and knock. It's the only one of the 7, and it's the last. It's about our times, brothers and sisters. This is the Lord saying to us in clear language. I'm coming in this era when you're in times of prosperity. Yeah, and we're in them right now. And everybody in this room knows from what they're hearing and seeing that they're about to come to an end. So how long have we got? Not very long. For a Great Depression looms. You know, you go to the US, they're in a huge tangle over finance. They have a debt of $19 trillion to the rest of the world. 19 trillion, you know what that is? Well, you know what the world's gross aggregate GDP is? Gross domestic product is? Now, Matthew's probably going to correct me on this. You know what the world's combined GDP is for all nations? 50 trillion. Pretty close, Matt? Yeah. You know what America is going to owe if they keep going on like they are at the moment for the next generation to pay back? 150 trillion. 3 times what all the nations on earth earn. Oh, you can't do that. And it's not going to happen. They're going to go down the gurgler very, very soon. You know, they're into what they call quantitative easing. Quantitative easing is called loosely printing money. They're not actually printing the presses. They're just putting money into the system using various mechanisms. Buying their own treasury bonds, for example, because nobody else will buy them. And what that means is it devalues the dollar, and it won't be long, and the US dollar is going to collapse. The European states are not much better off. They're on the verge of bankruptcy. You heard Farage say that the ECB, the central bank in Europe, is in debt 444 billion that they've put into these countries like Greece that are sinking into the mire. They're never going to get that back. They're going to go bankrupt. Yeah. China is preparing by building internal demand for its goods as exports decline. So what are they doing? Building cities. You've seen documentaries, haven't you, on the cities in China that have got nobody in them? Yeah. Well, they try to get all these rural people to go into cities so that they would then want to buy cars and things, and therefore they could buy Chinese products. But there's nobody there. So they're in trouble too. Canada and Australia, New Zealand, India, Russia and Israel are the best placed nations on earth. And there's no coincidence about that. That's exactly as we would expect it to be. Now listen to this.
To be joined now by the author of The New Depression, The Breakdown of the Paper Money Economy, Richard Duncan. Richard, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you.
Now, we'll all be listening up to this one because obviously we've been in several cadences and several mutations of this crisis. Now, what do you think was the prime cause for getting us into this paper money drama, so to speak?
Right, I think in order to understand this crisis, it's necessary to understand the role that credit has played in bringing it about. So when we broke the link between money and gold 40 years ago, this removed all the constraints on credit creation. And afterwards, credit absolutely exploded. In the US, it grew from 1 trillion to 50 trillion, 50-fold increase in 43 years. And this explosion of credit created the world we live in. It created very rapid economic growth. It ushered in the age of globalization. But it now seems that credit cannot expand any further because the private sector is incapable of repaying the debt that it has already. And if credit now begins to contract, there is a very real danger that we will collapse into a new Great Depression.
Now, that brings us back to the old discussion we had here with Roger before, that politicians, unfortunately, are scared of recession, never mind depression, and they probably won't implement any kind of policies that gets us back to reason, because one of them would include letting a number of banks fail, etc. So, to put it mildly, what is your conclusion? Where do we go from here?
Right, I think the thing that's driving government policy now is the belief that if they allow credit to contract, that we will have a new Great Depression. Milton Friedman taught Ben Bernanke that the Fed could have prevented the Great Depression if the Fed had prevented the money supply from contracting. But now credit is the new money. And if they don't prevent the credit supply from contracting, then we will have a new depression. So the policy is to ensure that credit continues to expand. And now that's what government debt is doing. The increase in government debt is making total debt grow. Otherwise, we would have already collapsed into a debt deflation death spiral.
This sounds like if you think there should be further credit expansion, that QE3, 4, 5, 6 and forevermore is going to be happening in the US economy as far out as we can see.
You know, we're in a very unfortunate position to be here teetering on the verge of a new Great Depression. But this explosion of credit has created a kind of new economic system. I call it creditism. Now, creditism creates great perils. If it begins to contract, we will collapse. But it also creates tremendous opportunities. And the opportunities we're overlooking. The opportunity is our governments have the ability to borrow massive amounts of money at just 1.5% interest. If they borrow aggressively and invest this in transformative 21st century technologies, they could actually generate enormous investment returns and new technologies that would end this crisis and, in fact, bring about a technological revolution that would improve the well-being of everyone on this planet.
And at some stage, the central banks, particularly the good central banks, the Bundesbank, for instance, when it gets its independence back, is going to raise interest rates and take the credit out. And when that happens, we go willy-nilly, and we can't prevent it into depression. And I think you just simply can defer, but you can't prevent. The depression, I agree with you, there's going to be a depression. It might start next year, it might start the year after, might start in 5 years' time. But we can't prevent it. And probably, the more you defer it, the worse it's going to be. Yes.
Well, the thing is, after a 4-decade, $50 trillion expansion of credit, if this credit bubble pops, the depression is going to be so severe that I honestly don't think our civilization could survive it. Therefore, that's why I'm proposing such radical solutions. Let's have the government borrow trillions of dollars and invest in renewable energy, in genetic engineering, biotechnology, nanotechnology, create new industries so that trade comes back into balance, new industries that the government could tax new products like a cancer vaccine that the government could sell to bring down its budget deficit. And in that way, we can keep the credit growing, and we can restructure the economy, and even if every last cent of this money is wasted, in a worst-case scenario, at least we would have prevented a depression for another 10 years, and we could have enjoyed this prosperity for another 10 years before our civilization collapses.
So you reckon they can do that? It's pretty obvious from that clip, isn't it, that the world knows that there will be a depression. It's only a question of when. Not if, when. So brothers and sisters, we can be confident that the day is at hand, because that's going to be, as he said, the killer for modern civilization. It's going to kill it off in its current form. And we know, of course, what will come after that. You can just lower that volume. Got a buzz there, Brother Kev. Just a couple more slides, and I want to show you that 7-minute clip on the first 12 hours of the crisis. And of course, the good thing about that is that, true to the pattern of Noah and Lot, we will have been taken. And so it'll be the angels who'll have to report to us what actually happens in the first 12 hours of the crisis that brings the Great Depression that's coming. But we'll get a bit of an inkling as to what will happen. And they've used clips from crises in the past. So things have happened in the past, and they've put it together into a package to demonstrate what it would be like, particularly in America, but for the rest of the world in that first 12 hours. Now, depressions. Well, we've got a history of them, haven't we? At least 180-odd years ago. 1929, in October, the stock market collapsed. By 1930, there was a worldwide depression, and it took them 10 years to dig themselves out of it, and then only with the war. You have to have a war. They got rid of 50 or 60 million mouths to feed, didn't they, in the Second World War? That makes life a lot easier. And, of course, they put people back to work, making armaments and all sorts of stuff for the war, so you get people back to work again. They've got terrific roads in America. They make ours look silly. Why? Well, because they pumped all this money in the 1930s into double-lane highways all over the country. Even their secondary roads make our good highways look silly. Yeah, put all that money in, get people back to work, and then go to war. That is how you get out of depressions. Well, we're not too far away from the next one. It's overdue. This crisis is really overdue in many ways. It's just waiting on the angelic intervention to trip it over the edge. And a time of trouble such as never was will begin. I don't know whether you've ever really looked closely at Daniel 12 verses 1 and 2. There's a statement there, there's a phrase there, at that time shall Michael stand up, that great prince, which stands for the children of thy people. And there shall be a time of trouble such as there never was since there was a nation on the earth. And at that time thy people shall be delivered. At that time? What time? Those who are written in the book, and many that sleep in the dust of the earth shall awake. You know the passage? It's telling us that the resurrection, the time when the angels are sent to collect the responsible, is the beginning of the time of trouble such as never was. And it will be that depression that brings about that time of trouble. So what will this crash trigger? International bankruptcy is going to force radical and rapid change on our world, and it's going to bring into place prophecies that seemingly have been stubborn, like peace for Israel, for example. Stubborn, isn't it? You're just wondering, when's that going to happen? Well, it's going to be pushed into place very, very quickly when this depression comes, because of what we said last night. Middle East peace will be achieved at last. Most nations will abandon their foreign adventures. They'll have to come out because there'll be no way they can maintain armies anywhere else. And that's going to allow Russia to expand its territories in the south, as we saw last evening. An elite group of nations supporting the papacy and being supported by the papacy will emerge in southern Europe. And we'll have the old Roman Empire in Europe back again. 10 toes, 10 horns. All the other nations, they'll go somewhere else. You know, that 27 of them. It'll only be 10 that will emerge out of that crisis, just as prophecy requires. And Israel will remain prosperous on the back of huge finds of oil and gas. So what is going to happen? First 12 hours of the crisis.
Stock Exchange. It's a cold, breezy day on Wall Street as markets await the Federal Reserve's announcement for QE4. Futures are up significantly. The Dow Jones just breached its 2008 high of 14,164. Gold just at an all-time high of 2,900. Silver just reached $100 per ounce. The dollar index is holding at 53. With official unemployment at 16.3%, there is a nervous feeling on Wall Street that if this doesn't work, the world could implode into a depression that will last for the remainder of the decade. 8:19 a.m., Beijing. Chinese officials announced that they can no longer allow Washington to devalue their holdings. After making their concerns private, China accepts that Washington will never stop paying its debts with inflated currency. China makes an official statement from Beijing, quote, "We have made our concerns known privately for some time. With QE4 about to be announced today, China will have no choice but to stop purchasing U.S. treasuries. We have allowed Washington to try to work through their imbalances for 4 years. But with global inflation and U.S. consumers rapidly shrinking as a percentage of global GDP, we feel that a Western recovery is unlikely until they reform their entitlement programs." 8:45 a.m., New York Stock Exchange. Upon hearing the statement from China, Dow futures have a sharp reversal and begin to drop. Gold leaps past $3,000 per ounce, up $150 per ounce in the last 26 minutes. CNBC awaits a statement from the White House. 8:50 a.m., Washington, D.C. The president makes an official statement to calm investors' fears. He tells Americans that he has spoken with several G20 leaders. They have assured him that they will continue to increase their purchase of treasuries and believe that a strong U.S. economy is the only thing that will bring back global prosperity. He has also spoken to Chairman Bernanke, who assures him that a strong dollar will be the result of QE4. The president also reminds Americans that his recent New Deal recovery programs that he passed through executive order will increase the likelihood of a lasting recovery. He also notes that Beijing, since 2009, has slowly been reducing their holdings, so the impact will be minimal. 9:51 a.m. New York. Dow futures fall 850 points in the first 20 minutes of trading. Markets are halted for 1 hour by the authorities. 10 a.m. Main Street, America. The news about the stock market in China has now spread. A panic begins to set in and unprepared Americans rush to the grocery store. In an attempt to purchase food and water, Americans that didn't know what was going on are alerted by all of the news stories and panic buying. Within 50 minutes, there is a nationwide rush to the stores. Empty store shelves in America become a reality. 10:52 a.m. New York. Markets reopen and the Dow Jones resumes its collapse. Investors around the world join the sell-off in bonds and stocks and begin to purchase commodities. Unlike the panic of 2008, this time commodities are seen as the only safe haven from the dollar crisis. 11:30 a.m. New York. The Dow falls 1,700 points since reopening. Trading is halted for at least 2 hours. The Federal Reserve injects $200 billion into the markets and announces that QE4 will be delayed until further notice. Congress is called back to D.C. for an emergency joint session. Some members of Congress are saying that they consider China's statement a financial attack. 12 p.m. Main Street, America. Several cities begin to see civil unrest after grocery stores are forced to close. Traffic in the streets and violence break out. The president puts the National Guard on alert for a possible deployment onto U.S. streets if things don't get under control soon. Several news agencies are reporting injuries at grocery chains and call for the authorities to do something before it gets worse. 12:15 p.m. Toronto, Canada. George Soros tells CNBC that a run on treasuries is imminent and that there is nothing the government can do to stop it. He says it is unfortunate that a controlled decline of the dollar was not coordinated better over the years. Today really could have been avoided if not for the Tea Party politicians who demanded fiscal responsibility and a constitutional government. 3 p.m. Gold closes at $11.53 for the day at $4,053 per ounce. Silver closes at $173 per ounce. The president announces that due to civil unrest in some areas of the country, U.S. stock markets will remain closed for the rest of the day. With the exception of mining and other inflation-related stocks, the majority of U.S. stocks are down significantly due to the sell-off and flight to safety in commodities. The Federal Reserve announces that it will begin to purchase U.S. treasuries and stocks in order to stabilize the markets. But this only feeds investors' fears of a full-blown treasury run and collapse of the dollar. 6 p.m. Asia. Asian markets begin a massive sell-off. Dollar collapse rumors begin to take hold of the markets. CNBC Asia looks into a possible COMEX default and complete breakdown in the U.S. economy. Gold spikes in Asia, up 17.50 in the first complete hour of trading. Gold is now at 58.03. 7 p.m., gold and silver bullion dealers across the world have suspended all sales due to no inventory. A COMEX default is now expected. Several central bank representatives propose a freeze on currency markets and a fixed devaluation of the U.S. dollar in order to calm investors. 7:30 p.m., the United States. The sun sets on America. In the last 12 hours, the world has changed. Americans are glued to their televisions, taking a crash course on a debauched currency. Smoke from fires in the cities have put a dark cloud over the nation. 7:45, the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve announces it will inject $1.5 trillion into the markets in order to stop any further decline in stocks. 7:55 p.m., OPEC. The final nail in the coffin. OPEC nations halt oil trades in U.S. dollars until further notice. They will only accept euros, renminbi, or gold. 7:59 p.m. The Federal Reserve's announcement to inject $1.5 trillion into the markets causes a sharp reversal in overseas markets. Stocks begin to rally even as Main Street melts down. 8 p.m., Manhattan. Gerard Adams, president of the National Inflation Association, sends out an urgent email alert. In it, he informs members that it is with great sadness that the time to warn and prepare Americans for hyperinflation has ended.
I think I'd say to that, even so, come Lord Jesus.